Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We are going to give people just a few minutes to jump on, and then we'll get started. While we're waiting for everybody else to join, we have both the chat and Q&A available to you guys. So if there's any specific questions or anything that you want me to try to answer in this presentation, if you just want to put those in the Q&A, that'd be great. Happy to make sure that I address all those things. We'll have the opportunity for questions throughout, so you'll have plenty of opportunity to ask questions. But if you had any burning questions, if you wanted to go ahead and get those started first, you can put those in the Q&A. All right, we'll give people just a few more minutes to jump in. I know noon, probably a whole bunch of people are grabbing their lunches, getting ready to jump in. So we'll give everybody just another couple minutes. Yeah, good question, Kara. I will definitely try to address that to the best of my ability. It's a little bit of a moving target, but yeah, we can talk about that for sure. Great, we'll give people just another minute and then we'll go ahead and get started. This is being recorded, so if you want to rewatch the recording afterwards, we'll send that out to you. And then we can send you the PowerPoint presentation as well, so you have all the links. I do have a couple different links in here. Okay, for those who have just joined, we do have the chat and the Q&A available. So if you have any burning questions, if you have anything that you want to make sure that I try to touch on today, certainly throw those into the Q&A or the chat, either one. And I will work to make sure that I answer those questions to the best of my ability. All right, I'm gonna give just like 30 more seconds and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, all right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. So thank you all for spending your lunch hour with me today and taking the time to be part of this conversation. So this is a conversation that from a mainstay perspective, we have pretty regularly. This is a pretty significant undertaking, this whole CMMC journey that we are all on. And so the goal of this session today is to really talk about how to build a roadmap for your organization and things to consider specific to your overarching strategy and partnerships. This isn't a road that you want to go alone. So we're going to talk a little bit today about how you think about partnerships, how you approach partnerships, what kinds of partnerships you should be considering, and really just talking through sort of all the key elements that you need to be thinking about as you're building your process and walking this path. So as I mentioned, we have both the chat and the Q&A. I'm going to try to keep an eye on the Q&A over here, so I'll be looking back and forth. But we have both of those available. Certainly reach out if you have any questions. I don't know that we'll take the full hour today, but certainly I will be here for the whole time and happy to have whatever conversations and follow this path wherever it takes us today. So the key takeaways for this session are talking about how to build a strong foundation for CMMC readiness. We are going to focus on tools and partnerships that help you streamline your process. And then, as I already mentioned, we're going to talk about why going it alone can lead to unnecessary risk and delay. This is a big undertaking. There are a lot of things to consider. There are a lot of moving parts and pieces. So it's really important to make sure that you have the right support. And so we want to talk about some proven strategies for successful assessment outcomes. And when we talk about assessment, we're talking specifically about CMMC level 2. So, as far as orientation goes, we have a current focus. So the current focus of this particular session or this discussion is really related to CMMC level 2. And this applies to anyone on the path, whether you're new to the path or whether you're well-traveled down this path. I see some familiar names, and so I know some of you have already started working on some of this. So I'm curious if you guys can just raise your hands in the meeting. How many of you are in the early stages of this process? How many of you have sort of just started this process or just sort of dipping your toe into the... Good. Okay. A couple of you. All right. How many of you are in the later stages? Okay. Good. Good. How many of you are sort of deep into this process? Okay. Good. Okay. And then how many of you aren't sure? You ever started down a path, right? It's like going on a hike and you're like, I'm not actually sure how close I am to the top here. So, okay. All right, good. All right, you guys can take your hands down. That's great. That's great. So we have a wide variety, which is fantastic. So that will lead to some good conversation here for sure. So like I said, specific questions can go in the chat. Raise a hand. I'm not sure I can actually unmute you all. So so let's stick with the chat and the Q&A at this point. Okay, so let's talk about some foundational pieces. So we're talking about partnerships. The first thing that I want to talk about is actually partnerships inside your organization. And I know that a lot of individuals don't necessarily go immediately to what are my partnerships inside my organization, but it's really, really the foundation of how you navigate this process. So the first and most important thing that you have in your organization is executive buy-in and leadership. You need to have a CMMC driven culture. And that doesn't necessarily mean that every individual is focused specifically on CMMC or driving to outcomes here. However, it does mean that CMMC is considered in all of the strategic decisions that your organization is making. It's considered in changes to systems, changes to processes and procedures. These are all things that have to start at the top. You know, we hear a lot, less so these days, but you know, in the earlier days of CMMC, there was a lot of trending towards organizational leadership feeling like this is sort of like an IT problem, and that is actually not at all how CMMC works, and that is not really where this starts. So this is really needing to start with your executive buy-in and leadership. So if you don't have that executive buy-in and leadership, that's the first piece that you need to start with. That's where you need to start building your program from, because if you don't have that, you're really going to struggle to get the rest of the things addressed. So the next piece is the technology support. So technology is a big piece of this. Whether this is internal or external, it actually doesn't really matter. You could do both, either a combination. You can have some internal and some external, but you need to make sure that you have good technology support. And that includes not only your infrastructure, but also your systems. So your line of business applications. You need to make sure that you have good support there, whether that's through the vendor, whether that's internal. It doesn't necessarily matter whether it's internal or external, but you need to have solid support there. So underneath that, I have technical, administrative, and physical. So this ties back to the three sort of types of controls that we have with CMMC level 2. There are 110 controls. There are 320 assessment objectives, which are basically individual statements that say you do X, Y, and Z. So there are 320 of those, and they cover technical things, administrative things, and physical things. So your technology support will support all three types of those objectives. People, process, and technology leaders. So this is obviously a very broad category, but this is who you need involved. You need your HR, you need your finance, you need your operations, you need sales, you need all kinds of people involved in the decision-making process. So you need to make sure that you have these partnerships built internally, and people know what their function is. People know what their role is. People know how they should be participating in these conversations and these decision-making processes related to CMMC shifts. And then the last piece I have there is facilities management. So this may or may not apply to your organization, depending on the size of your organization, whether or not you even have a physical facility. A lot of the organizations that we work with that are aligned with CMMC have a manufacturing facility. And so there is actual physical facilities that need to be managed in terms of access and visitors and vendor access and all that kind of stuff. So this is the first set of partnerships that you need to have. These need to be strong partnerships. Everyone needs to be moving in the same direction. Everyone needs to be driving towards the same end result. And as an organization, that needs to start with your executives and all the way down to individual contributors. So that's the first foundational pieces that we need to really focus on. The second piece here is why are we going to do partnerships? Why do we need partnerships? And this comes back to sorry, I'm just trying to keep an eye on the Q&A, make sure I don't miss anything. So why partnerships, right? Partnerships are important. You probably, as organizations, don't do your own taxes, because who the heck understands the tax code other than someone who does that for a living? So you outsource that. You outsource a lot of your accounting, your tax filing, that kind of thing, right? Those are areas where you don't necessarily have the expertise, and as a result, you find someone who is an expert in that to make sure that you have the support that you need and that you can do those things correctly. It's the exact same thing with CMMC. The opportunity to outsource here provides increased expertise and most of the time lower costs. If you were actually to look for someone who could fully support all of the different 320 assessment objectives for CMMC across your whole organization, you are going to be looking for a needle in a haystack, and you're going to have to pay that person a whole lot of money to be able to support your organization. Most organizations can't afford that, and most individuals don't have that broad of a skill set to be able to offer all of the support that you need across all of the things. So an optimal solution here for CMMC, if the best way to achieve CMMC compliance is to have a multifaceted, multi-layered approach and a comprehensive security program. So you want to have a big picture process that says this is our overarching security program that includes multiple resources, multiple tools, multiple solutions. That's the best, most effective way to meet CMMC. And it also increases your efficiency because with specialized resources, they can do the things that they are specialized in and they can do them quickly, and you're likely to get better results the first time. You're likely to get more direct results or more accurate results the first time. The government, in this case, the government came to you for your expertise, for your specialization, right? The organizations that we work with have oftentimes very specialized skill sets. They do things that not a lot of other organizations do. They're really niche, oftentimes very, very cool things that you all are doing. And CMMC is not your area of expertise. So if you don't have the right partnerships, you're focused on things that maybe aren't within your wheelhouse, and as a result are a distraction, pulling you away from the things that you do very well. So there's a lot of really good reasons to use partnerships. Again, partnerships internally, partnerships externally. For the rest of the presentation, we'll be talking about partnerships externally, but essentially, there's a lot of benefit to partnerships, and there's a lot of opportunity to have a variety of different partnerships that will make your security program much more effective, much more sustainable, and much more cost effective as well. Here we go. Okay. So where should you look for partners? So how do you know where you need partners, right? So these are some general guidelines. So areas that are not considered to be within your organization's wheelhouse. Now, this maybe feels like a fairly obvious statement. However, there are any number of people in your organization who could do a variety of different things. One of the things that I like to say, I have a lot of people on my team that are multi-talented, and just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? And so if we have an individual who is very capable of doing something, is that really what we need them to be doing, right? Is that really the best use of their time? And so as a leadership team, and again, this comes back to that executive buy-in, that executive leadership, we really want to make sure that we're focusing on the right resources, right? We talk about it as being the right seat on the right bus, making sure that you're focused on the things that you should be focused on. And so anything outside of your wheelhouse is a great opportunity for you to look for partners. Sometimes it's the right thing to do to look for a partner, and sometimes it's not. So, but those are areas that you want to target. Areas where you have significant risk. This really means that if there are areas where not doing something well has significant risk to your organization, and this isn't something that's within your wheelhouse, this is a really good area to look for partners. There's sometimes when you're outsourcing, there is a different type of risk, but the reality is, if you're an organization that 80% of your revenue comes from the Department of Defense, and you aren't able to get your CMMC certification, that's a significant risk to your business. So you want to make sure that you're focusing on having the right partnerships, right? If you have, if you're looking at, other compliances, right? If you're looking at, safety, and you don't have the right processes in place to have the right, safety measures, and the risk of not having the right safety measures is significant to your business, you want to look for partners to help you fill those gaps. Sometimes where you have a situation where you're completing a task in-house actually could bring risk, inefficiency, or distraction. So we touched on this a little bit in the last slide, but this is really, where you could have someone do something that, maybe they're capable of doing it, but it takes them you know, 2 or 3 times longer than it would somebody who this is their specialty. And so that person doing that task reduces your efficiency. It creates risk because this isn't necessarily their specialty. So there might be mistakes or rework, and it distracts them from actually doing the things that they are most successful at. And so these are all areas, you have to sometimes you have to take a step back, and this is really hard. We see this actually a lot with individual IT or on-site IT or in-house IT, where they're incredibly capable. The IT teams that we work with are incredibly capable, and they have the ability to do a lot of different things. But the question is, what should they be spending their time on, right? And so you want to make sure that you're thinking about this in a sort of fairly I don't want to say antiseptic, but right, you want to be a little bit detached from it, and say, okay, what makes the most sense for our business, and how do we separate out where should we be spending our time, what's not in our wheelhouse, where do we have risk, and then what can we, what tasks are we doing that would actually be less beneficial for us to do versus outsourcing. So some examples of these things are third-party assessments, which would be sort of like consulting services, log monitoring, which would actually be a line of business application, and then incident response, which could be a combination of line of business as well as consulting services. So there's any number of ways that you can fill these gaps and the types of partners that you can be looking for. One note here: don't forget to manage your existing partners. This is one that we see happen pretty regularly, in that you go through the process of getting a third party, you identify an area that you need a third party or a partner to solve for you, and then you take on that partner, and then there's not a lot of management, there's not a lot of assessment, there's not a lot of review and monitoring to make sure that that partner continues to be the right resource or the right support to fill whatever gap you're trying to fill. So that is a really important piece. And vendor management, which is essentially what I'm talking about here, vendor management is actually part of the set of CMMC requirements that we're talking about. So that is something that you'll have to have a clean and clear process for. You'll have to document all of those things. You'll have to assess them on an annual basis at a minimum, and make sure that they really are solving the problems that you need them to solve. So I'm going to slow down. I'm going to pause there for a second and give you guys, if there's any questions that you want to throw into the chat, let me know. Give it just a second. See someone typing. So James has a question: do you do certifications of an org? So are you asking specifically if Mainstay does certifications? If that is the question, we do not. So I'll touch on that in just a little bit, but CMMC assessments are done by C3PAOs, which I'm sure there's some sort of Star Wars joke in there, but C3PAOs are the ones that are doing those assessments. Mainstay is a registered practitioner, and so we can actually do the consulting, we can prep you for that, but we don't actually do the assessment work. We do have some partnerships for assessors that we can speak to if you're interested in that. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Oh, look at that. James, well done. You set me up. So we have we're a registered practitioner organization, like I said. So there are 3 acronyms that you'll need to know here, because as with anything government related and also IT related, we love acronyms. So registered practitioner. So the 3 acronyms we have are RP, RPA, and RPO. So RP is just registered practitioner. RPA is registered practitioner advanced, and that is just an additional level. So you start with the registered practitioner, and then you go into the advanced level, which is just additional training that you get through the cyber AV, which we'll talk about here in just a second. And then RPO is just a registered practitioner organization. So Mainstay is an RPO. We have RPs and RPAs on staff, which allow us to have that designation of a registered practitioner organization. What that means is that we have been trained by the cyber AB, and we are in a position in which we can consult and help organizations prepare for the certification process for CMMC. The C3PAOs that I just talked about, those are the organizations that will actually go through and do the assessment with you. So Mainstay does not do that. And there are guidelines that say you cannot have the organization who prepares you for the assessment. So if you use like a registered practitioner organization, they cannot also then do the assessment, because then they're assessing their own work, which is not how the cyber AB wants that to work. And so you'll need to have at least a certified third-party assessing organization. Registered practitioner, you definitely want to look for somebody who has this, but you don't have to use a registered practitioner. It's a benefit for sure, but there are other organizations out there who will help you get prepared without being an RP or an RP, or without being an RPO. So it's up to you. That's an optional piece. Obviously, we feel like it's important for us to have as many designations as we can to support the organizations that we support. And then like I said, we do have some partners in terms of a C3PAO. My recommendation for the C3PAO piece is that you talk to multiple different C3PAOs to find an organization that aligns with your ethos and that you have a good working relationship with, because the assessment process does take several months. You will spend a lot of time with these people. And so you want to make sure that they're an organization that you really connect with and that you feel like is really a good partner for you. We also want to focus a lot on our line of business vendors. These are going to be organizations that are going to help you manage your line of business. You need to make sure that they are on board with this. And as part of the CMMC process, one of the things that you'll have to do is evaluate their security and make sure that they're aligned with CMMC requirements, and that any vendors that you have that don't align with CMMC requirements, you either need to figure out how to replace them or how to get them where you need them to be. So that is it's a big question mark. In a lot of organizations, there are some challenges in terms of whether or not those line of business applications are even in scope of the assessment, depending on, it's all based on the information that that line of business is holding for you. And then, sometimes you have vendors that just you don't have the ability to sway how they navigate things for you. And so you have to make sometimes some challenging business decisions about your line of business applications. And then, of course, security tools and layers. This is a big topic in terms of you need to have multiple security layers. This is anything from things that you have inside Microsoft Office or G Suite. These are things like a SIM solution, endpoint management, et cetera. Sometimes, depending on how you are managing or depending on how your IT works, sometimes these security tools will come to you through your IT provider, and sometimes these security tools will be things that you take on directly and that you're either internal IT or managing, or someone on your staff is managing. So any one of these organizations, these are all third-party resources that have to be included in your overarching process, your overarching management of your security program. So Eli asked a question about shared responsibility matrix. Yep. So this is a great question. So we do have a shared responsibility matrix for our clients that we support through CMMC. We have a clear listing of everything that's required for CMMC. Again, specific to level 2. Level 1 is pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. So that's a much simpler shared responsibility matrix, but we do have that as well. And we basically say it's sort of 3 columns that this is Mainstay, this is the client, and this is shared. And we may have some that are, so like your line of business application may be, client focused, if Mainstay is not managing that for you, but it may also be a shared. So there's a variety of different things, but we do offer that. We do provide that in terms of based on how your IT works, based on how your third party vendors work, based on your organizational structure. We do provide that shared responsibility matrix, which is an important piece, understanding who's responsible for what. And as part of your assessment process, your IT provider, whether they are internal or external, will be part of your assessment process. So Mainstay, for example, we have a client going through an assessment right now, and so we are in scope, for lack of a better word. So our work, the work that we do, we are in scope for that assessment for that particular client, and so we're part of the assessment process. And they're asking us for things like, how do you manage information? How are you managing access? All of those things are part of the process. And so if you have a different MSP that you work with, or if you have an internal IT, those will definitely be in scope. And that will have to be, the shared responsibility matrix will have to be, we'll take into account all of those different pieces as well. So yeah, good question there. Okay, so I want to dive into some free resources. So one of the things, not to get into too much of a history lesson, but CMMC level 2, or CMMC as a whole, is based on NIST 800-171, which is a set of requirements that the NIST organization came up with, and it has actually been in effect since 2017. There are a couple of clauses that you probably have in all of your existing contracts that are tied to NIST 800-171. And one of the challenges with that was that it was all self-assessment, self-attestation. Organizations could say whether or not they were meeting these requirements without really having any great expertise. But also the information that was available around NIST 800-171 was not super user-friendly. It was not super accessible. It was written in a lot of government speak. And so one of the benefits of CMMC is that the organizations that are involved in this, the Cyber AB specifically, and the Department of Defense, have done a really, really good job of creating really good documentation. So the new documentation specific to CMMC is much more user-friendly. It gives you information on the requirements. It gives you examples of how you meet that requirement. It gives you scenarios where this requirement might, impact you. And so there's a lot of really good information out there. It's a lot of information. So just be aware that there is a lot of information, which is great. Lots of resources available to you, but there's a lot that you might have to trudge through. And again, if you work with an organization who has this expertise, they can help you cut through a lot of that noise, right? They, like Mainstay, we've been when they first, we've been doing presentations on this set of requirements since 2018, when it was just NIST 800-171, and then we've been deep in the CMMC space since it was released in January of 2020. But there are a lot of free resources out there. So the Cyber AB has really good information. They're the assessing organization. They are the ones that actually will grant you your CMMC certification. The C3PAOs will do the work and present their findings to the Cyber AB, who will then review that, ask any clarifying questions, and then actually issue you the certification, which is valid for 3 years, just if that was an open question. And then also the DoD Chief Information Officer, there's a whole CMMC section on the CIO site that will give you all kinds of information. So I have these linked, and like I said, we'll send out the presentation afterwards so that you all have access to these links. There's a CMMC podcast. So there's a variety of people that you can follow on LinkedIn, but I will say that Summit 7 is an organization. They're a managed security service provider out of the DC area. Jacob Horn and Scott Edwards both have really, really invested just hours and hours and hours of their lives to demystifying what's happening with CMMC. They're quite engaging in the way that they talk about this. They're both characters and have a really great way of helping demystify some of this and really making it digestible as organizations go. So I highly recommend following Summit 7. You can go to their website. There's a bunch of resources there. You can follow them on LinkedIn, and they will provide all kinds of really, really high quality information. So, certainly try to find those resources because they are really very helpful. On a more local scale, the New Hampshire Small Business Development Center and the New Hampshire Tech Alliance both are involved in supporting this for local organizations. So the SBDC Mainstay and the SBDC partnered together, and we've got training as well as some free 90-minute consulting sessions that are available to you. So if you're interested in that, you can go out, and there's some training out there that we put together that really dives into the individual controls, the individual pieces that that you might have questions on. It talks about, the different categories of controls. Like I said, there's 110 controls, 320 assessment objectives. And so there's a lot to navigate, but that training will help get you started anyway. And then, like I said, there are some 90-minute consulting opportunities with Mainstay where we'll help you kind of get a sense of where you actually are. Going all the way back to the first or the second slide, where I asked how many of you are on the path but aren't sure how far you are. We can help you. We can help you locate yourself. We can help you identify where you are. So there's a lot of good free resources out there. So Kara, I'm going to use this to circle back to your original question. The question is, can you provide guidance on expectations of cost to be incurred to achieve CMMC 2 compliance? So this is a great question and one that we get all the time. And there are a couple of things that I would say impact this. The first is how much what I will call technical debt are you carrying? How that is an assessment of how up to date your infrastructure is. So like your firewalls and your switches, are they up to date? Are they supported? How old are your machines? How old are your operating systems, right? There's a variety of things in terms of technical debt. So if everything is modern, if everything is up to date, if everything is patched and on a supported operating system, you have new infrastructure, right? You're starting with less technical debt and you can just build on it from there. But you should expect that there are a significant number of projects that you'll have to do. So the first thing is you'll have to be in one of the government email environments. So you'll have to either be GCC High for Office 365, and then I think there's a G Suite Government. And I'm not actually sure what that one's called. We primarily work in the Microsoft space just because it's a more comprehensive solution from a security perspective. You can check more boxes with GCC High. Now, this is an interesting thing that I will talk about really quickly. So slight left turn, and then I'll come back to your question, Kara. The GCC, Google Workspace. Thanks, Eli. Is FedRAMP. The GCC versus GCC High is a really interesting question. We get that one a lot, actually. If you have controlled unclassified information, CUI, which is what CMMC is protecting, and ITAR is part of that, right? So if you have ITAR information, GCC High is the right path for you. GCC High is typically in the ballpark of about 3 times as expensive as just general commercial Microsoft Office 365, and so that can be costly. GCC is acceptable if you only have CUI but no ITAR. We find that most manufacturers have actually both, and so So that is something that you would want to work with your IT on, or work with, a consultant like Mainstay, or, even a C3PAO can help you navigate sort of what information you have and what you might need. But I would plan for GCC High, which is guaranteed to get you the support and the checkboxes that you need from a security perspective. So other than that, you'll have, infrastructure that you'll need to make sure is up to date, which can be, a couple of $1,000s to tens of $1,000s, depending on how complex your infrastructure is. You'll need things like a SIM solution. So you'll need the technology as well as the resources to monitor the SIM solution, to respond to the alerts. You'll need things like incident response and endpoint management, multi-factor authentication, all of those things. And so depending on how much technical debt you have, and depending on how many of those layers you already have in place, we've seen organizations that, this will be, just to maintain the infrastructure, you're probably talking, $10,000 to $20,000 a year. Some organizations, it's several $100,000 to get them up to speed, to get them where they need to be. And so it really does flex. One thing that's really important to note is that the scope of your controlled and classified information, the scope of your environment can have a significant impact on the cost. And so you want to make sure that you're working with an organization that can help you understand the scoping process. And in this link to the Cyber AB, where I have the downloads and forums, there is a scoping document that will actually walk you through how you scope these things. And so understanding what the scope is for you as an organization will help you manage the costs. And you want to make sure that you're building the security program to support the information, the controlled and classified information. But you want to do that in a way that allows you to maximize security and minimize cost, right? And so you want to make sure that you're working with an organization who can balance those things with you. And also, because security is another level, we want to make sure that we're keeping you as efficient as possible, right? So when Mainstay approaches these things, we're talking about, how does your business function? Where does the data live? How can we keep you as efficient as possible, get you as secure as possible, and do it at a price that makes sense for your organization, right? That's sustainable. There's no point in doing all of these things if you can't financially support it, and then you can't run your business anyway, right? That's not at all the right. It's not at all the right approach. So those are things that that we consider when we're talking about this. So free resources, use as many of these free resources as you can. Certainly reach out to the Small Business Development Center, and get your hands on some of that free consulting work. We're excited to chat with you. One thing I do want to say, I just went back a couple of slides. So one thing that I did want to touch on was for third-party resources, and just full warning, I'm just very, very close to a soapbox here. If you have any vendors reach out to you that tell you something along the lines of, our product will get you 90 to 100% of the way there from a compliance perspective, that's not accurate. This is, going all the way back, right? So these are the partnerships, these are the foundational pieces, right? So we need all of our organization to be involved. We need all of these areas, we need to be supported. There is no silver bullet for this challenge. There is no silver bullet. There is no one tool. There is no one organization, right? Going back to the question that Eli asked around the shared responsibility matrix, right? There are any number of individuals within your organization and outside of your organization that are going to play into the ability to be successful from a CMMC perspective. And so it's really important for everyone to understand that there isn't a silver bullet. And if somebody tells you that they have a tool that will get you 90% of the way there, I would ask a lot of really difficult questions. I would really, really challenge them on that. And just know that, you need people, you need process, you need technology, you need monitoring, you need strategy, you need HR, finance, leadership, technology, right? You need all of these people and all of these things. And so the best approach here is a multifaceted, multi-resource, multi-layer approach. And so if somebody comes to you and says, we're a one-stop shop, I would not believe them. Again, just me. We have seen this happen. We have seen organizations. There are organizations out there in the wild selling this kind of silver bullet, and it never pays off. We often see clients come to us and say, we bought this solution, we thought it was going to do everything we needed it to, and now we're realizing that it only actually does 50% or 40% or sometimes even 20%. So, you want to make sure that you're asking the right questions. And that goes back again to that vendor management, making sure, yeah, Eli, CMMC in a box. It's not a thing. It's vaporware, right? It's not a thing. Yeah, exactly. It's built, not bought. It's a great way to say that, Eli. We understand that this is an overwhelming and complex challenge, right? And it feels so exciting to be able to just feel like, yes, here, I'm going to give you all of this, and you just handle it for me, right? But again, that's not how it works. So make sure that you're approaching this from a really strong place, from a really strong foundation, having all of those internal partnerships followed by external partnerships, and that you're looking for that sort of multifaceted. And of course, Mainstay is happy to help. We're always happy to have conversations. If you just have questions about whether or not we're the right fit for you, we're happy to have a discussion with you. I think we are a top performer in the space for sure. I think we really work to make sure that organizations are able to be successful, and that we're not just going to try to sell you the most expensive thing we can. We're going to try to find the right thing that is the best fit for your organization based on who you are, how you function, what data you have, where it lives, right? We're going to take all of that into consideration. And so it's not a simple out of the box, one size fits all. It's how are you as an organization going to solve this challenge, and how can we as an organization support that? So that's where I will leave it. Questions, I think, let me just run through the chats. Are there any other questions? Anything that you want to talk about related to partnerships, related to vendor management, anything totally separate related to CMMC? I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. People a second to think about it. Okay, so like I said, this is being recorded, and we will send out the PowerPoint presentation, so you'll have the links. But you can just do a Google search. If you are a ChatGPT user, you can ask ChatGPT for guidelines on CMMC, and it will provide all kinds of really great information. So I would make sure that it's directing you to the official resources, the Cyber AB, DoD, etc. But certainly feel free to reach out if you have questions or need anything. I will actually put my email in the chat if you need anything, or if you have questions. But anyone at Mainstay is happy to help. Okay, let's see. We have a question. As I read, certifications are pass fail. Okay, so the question is, as I read, certifications are pass fail. If Mainstay is our assessor consultant, does this assure our pass? How does that work? What is your, or what's been your experience? Yeah, so great question, James. So there's a couple things that I would say. So we don't necessarily guarantee a pass, but what does happen is we will we will prepare you for the assessment process, which has a couple of key parts. So in the link to the Cyber AB, there's an assessment guide. It's a sort of summary of everything that happens as part of an assessment. So the first thing that happens is a pre-assessment. So Mainstay will go through that pre-assessment. We know what's in that assessment guide. We will help you gather all the documentation that you need, all the evidence. We'll meet with your C3PAO. We'll go through the pre-assessment for you. If in the pre-assessment, the assessor finds anything that they need additional focus on that needs to be updated or addressed, we will absolutely work through that with you and make sure that we're getting all of those things completed. Full transparency, there's not a huge number of organizations that have been through this yet. We're starting to see a lot more come through. But at this point, we're fairly clear on what is expected and what will work and what won't work. And so we will work with you to make all of those recommendations. As an organization, you still have decision rights as to what you implement and what you don't. So that is something that we will guide you on, but you will retain those decision rights. So what we do guarantee is that as you go through the assessment process, we will walk that process with you, and we will help you build solutions for whatever gaps there may be. And we have gone through this process. We've gone through a couple of pre-assessments. We're going through a full assessment right now with a client. So we are continuing to learn and grow as well. We have some great partners. There's an organization called Monarch ISC. They're based in Maine, and they're a C3PAO, and we've worked closely with them. They've given us a lot of really good feedback so we can prepare our clients correctly. So at this point, we don't guarantee a pass. However, we guarantee that we will support you until you get a pass. So slightly different phraseology, but same general sense. So Dylan had a question. Given the limited number of C3PAOs, how do you foresee the DoD managing the rollout of CMMC? Yeah, so this is a great question. So some of this is just a math problem, and they're continuing to have new organizations go through the C3PAO process. They are ramping up their ability to get more organizations through that process, but also part of the reason that they're doing the progressive rollout of this clause to organizations is so that they can give the C3PAOs time to go through that process. That's not to say that we're not going to run into some sort of bottleneck at some point, but as of right now, it seems like if an organization is ready to get assessed, they can get assessed. It does also seem like, though, for the C3PAOs that we've talked to, usually it's like a 3 to 5 month lead time. So if you're ready to go through an assessment process, they are looking, 3 months out to do the pre-assessment, and then usually it's a couple months after that where they can actually start the full assessment. So it does seem like there is a little bit of a lead time, but nothing prohibitive, I don't think, at this point. But it is definitely something that we are keeping an eye on. I mean, I think they're estimating that something in the ballpark of like 85 to 100,000 organizations are going to have to go through this assessment process. And starting in October, they're looking at having this in new contracts going out. So if you have existing contracts that don't have this clause in it, then that likely won't show up until you renew that contract. But if you're applying for, or if you're going after a new contract starting after October 1st, there's a good chance that it'll be in there. So I think the phased rollout is their attempt at giving themselves enough runway so that they can get enough people up to speed so that they can get through these processes. But yeah, it's a good question. Good. Other questions? Give it just a minute. Yeah, thanks, James. Thanks for coming. All right. I think that wraps it up. I'll hang out for the next few minutes. Oh, question. Even in the first phase, it is DoD who elects to require certification. Yes. Yes. It's all tied to the contracting officers and the programs. So I think there's some general guidelines around which programs this is going to start with, and then it's up to the contracting officers. But interesting note, this is something that you want to start looking for in those contracts, so you know what those expectations are. And sometimes there's opportunity to have a conversation about whether or not that clause is needed based on the information that's actually being shared within the program and your work within that program. So that is something going back to the scope, what's included and what's not. So yeah. Yep. Um, all right, good. So I will wrap up there. I will still hang out if anybody has any questions or if anything else pops up, but you guys have my email address. Obviously anyone at Mainstay is happy to answer any questions. And you can just also email info at MSTech. So I can send that info mstech.com. And our business development team will get back to you. But yeah, so I'll hang out for a few minutes, but thanks all for coming. I appreciate you spending some time with me today.